So the Trudeau government has just announced a massive gun ban, about 1,500 different makes and models, and the event they're using as a catalyst or excuse is explicitly stated as the Nova Scotia shooting. In Justin Trudeau's press conference, he did say every Canadian will remember where they were on April 18th, 2020, which is the day of the shooting in Nova Scotia. You're also going to remember where you were because it's the same place you were for the last 3 months because we're all locked down in the exact same spot. Now, when that happened, I said you can talk about politics right after an event if it's related, because it's not like, I mean, give it a couple hours, but you have to talk about what you want and you have to be honest with it. Is our policy going to be pushing our political agenda, or is it to mitigate the disaster that had just happened? Now, if you're talking about policy that mitigates the disaster that just happened, and that's your primary priority, then fine. But if your primary priority is your political agenda, well, now I have a problem. Now you're using the tragedy in a malicious way, right? So you can talk about an event in terms of politics if you're not selfish and underhanded about it, and that's sort of what Justin Trudeau is doing, because the gun ban would not have stopped that shooting. It wouldn't have. So what do we want? Do we want to save the most amount of lives possible? Because that's what Justin Trudeau is saying. He said these guns are designed specifically to kill the most amount of people in the quickest period possible. And as someone who knew nothing about guns like 4 years ago, literally nothing, it would be nice if no one had guns in our society. That way there was no crime, but like criminals exist. People break the law, and you can't create utopia. So most of the gun violence comes from illegal guns. So banning more guns doesn't stop the people committing these crimes from doing it further. You're just taking the guns out of the hands of the people. Now, when we talk about killing the most amount of people in the quickest amount of time, he said specifically military-style assault rifles. That's not a classification of gun. It's not. What the AR-15 or any other rifle is, it's semi-automatic. And semi-automatic sounds really scary, but when you look it up, you can just Google it. Semi-automatic means you pull the trigger and one bullet comes out, right? For every time you click the trigger, one bullet comes out. So cops have a semi-automatic handgun, right? They pull a trigger, gun goes out. It's one shot. Fully automatic, that's like you can just hold the trigger down and it will fly. That's already illegal. That's even illegal in the States. Okay, that's already fully banned. So he was saying, indigenous people sometimes have guns, and that's the only reason guns are good, because it's Justin Trudeau and he's babbling on. And you don't need an AR-15 to kill a caribou. It's like, yeah, true. But you're going to get some other semi-automatic rifle. Like, are we saying you need to get a bolt-action rifle now where you shoot it and then you have to manually reload it? Like, that's the semi-automatic part, right? Semi-automatic is the fact that you don't have to, you click it and then it reloads itself, like it recocks itself. Now, like a really skilled rifleman, right? If you want to ban semi-automatics and everything's bolt action, well, if they practice, if they're trained, right? If another Danforth shooter, a guy goes to Pakistan and gets some training in it, he can, it's not going to save any lives. This is just purely cosmetic. So we're talking about a purely cosmetic thing. Now he's putting Bill Blair in charge of this, which is a joke, because Bill Blair has been the minister of nothing, and now he's the minister of gun bans. But on his watch, shootings have increased. Crime increased in Toronto. Gun violence went up. All he did is push this sort of progressive agenda. So Bill Blair has been shown to be ineffective on this, and everyone in positions of leadership, once they push this, gun violence and crime has increased. So from a sort of pragmatic, we need to save the most amount of lives possible standpoint, this falls short, right? So it's fair to say that they're using this tragedy to push political agenda. Now, there's another thing we should talk about. It's sort of, okay, the argument for guns in a sort of a legal, philosophical, constitutional rights type of way. So this isn't America where you have the Second Amendment, but here's the sort of argument for gun ownership. Do you have the right to defend yourself? That's an important question. Do you have the right to defend yourself, your life, your property, your family? Right? Do you have that right? Is that a right that people should have? Now, if you say you have the right to defend yourself, then we go, okay, you can do it in a reasonable manner. You are out in a farm in a rural area, and you need to defend yourselves. One, maybe coyotes come, right? You have young kids, they like to play outside, but there's coyotes, and sometimes coyotes can eat your kids. Right? You would need a long rifle, an accurate rifle, to sort of protect yourselves from coyotes. Let's say you live in a rural standpoint, right? Where you see someone's trespassing on your property, they're coming to rob you. if you call the police, they're 30 minutes away. The attackers are 30 seconds away, right? Do you have the right to then take it upon yourself to defend yourself, right? That's the answer. So if you say, yes, people should have the right to defend themselves, then we have to say, okay, how can they defend themselves? I think it's reasonable to say, no, you can't have a grenade launcher because, that would cause too much damage. And, we can't just have untrained people with fully automatic weapons, but semi-automatic, click, point, right? Especially in Canada, you need like a mental check. You need the process to get a gun is pretty thorough, right? So I think that's pretty reasonable. So so if you believe people have the right to defend themselves, then you should have semi-automatic weapons. The problem is, and I'm pretty sure I can believe that Justin Trudeau is ignorant enough to not know this and arrogant enough to not look it up. That I can believe, but I don't believe that of every single person in the Liberal Party. I think this is sort of doing it to appease themselves to their base. I think there's a lot of city folk here who just don't know what a semi-automatic means. It sounds scary. It used to sound scary to me. The other thing is, so gun owners are giving 2 years amnesty to comply with this. So after 2 years, what's going to happen? So I have friends who used to live in Venezuela. And Venezuela, no one thought that Chavez would be able to take control and turn it into a dictatorship because everyone was armed. Venezuela had gotten so dangerous, crime was everywhere, everyone was armed. But then just one day, they just sent SWAT squads house by house by house by house, just by force, and confiscated all the guns. No one thought they'd be able to do it, but they just, blitz, thunder, lightning. Now, do I see Venezuelan-style gun confiscation happening in Canada? No. But do I see some SWAT teams kicking down some doors of some law-abiding citizens using the excuse that, well, we saw them say things about how they would never give up their guns, so we sent in a SWAT team, which violates freedom of speech? Is the government monitoring you? I definitely see a situation happening where, not on the scale of Venezuela, but you could definitely say, yes, there is a future 2 years from now where you can see police heavily armed going door to door to Canadian law-abiding houses confiscating guns. And what happens when someone dies doing this? And there's another thing of like, what are all the externalities here? And then do we have to grant the government the authority to use lethal force on citizens for gun ownership? And they're not going to do this to criminals, right? If we found out there was a terrorist cell in Canada, there's no way the Liberal government would authorize a sort of search and seizure of like, if they like, well, if we're pretty sure they have bombs and they've been saying things about, death to Canada and we're going to destroy the West. Do you think they'd send a SWAT team in there? But, there's so many civil rights violations. It's going to get so much more complicated here that we're not going to be saving lives, and we're going to be sacrificing a lot of liberty in the name of Justin Trudeau's political ideology. That you just got to look at this and sort of be honest with yourself. Even if you're like me and you're like, I don't own a gun, it would be nice if no one in the world had guns. It'd be, it's a bit actually less people die in wars now that we have guns, except for World War II. But things are more sanitary now that you stay. It's a weird thing, technological advancement. Unless you have the First World War, take it aside. This video is ending on a bit of a rant where I'm getting into military history in my head, so I'm just going to drop that now. I'm saying I don't think this is helpful. I don't approve, and we're going to be heading down a road where we're going to open up a can of worms a lot worse than the problem we have right now.